All right. I think we are on. Let me see. Make sure everything went through. All right, we're on. We are on. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I have a special guest with me, and who's going to like get us started right now with the discussion that we're having. So we're gonna start quickly, but and then we'll go into like the culture stuff that's been happening today and other things or whatever. So I want to introduce you to my friend Anglo Acadian, and he's basically a cool person who was. I heard him on a space. He knows his stuff. He knows a lot of things, a lot more than I do, and I like to bring you all the facts as much as I can. From I love bringing people on who know so many things. So you can go ahead and say hi to the people. Anglo.
Good.
They will be coming in. It takes them a little while, but they will be coming in. But yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Casey. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for having me on to talk about this topic today. And I'll try to be as concise for your audience. And to begin with, I want everyone to understand what Zionism is in theory and it is in practice. So it's one and the same. It's the establishment of a Jewish national homeland, right? But in the truer sense, Zionism is a rejection of assimilation. And assimilation is a problem in the face of Judaism and has been since the very Hebrew term for assimilation goes back to when the Greeks had conquered the Jewish kingdoms under Alexander, and they were under the Seleucids, where going to embracing the Greek culture, the Hellenic culture. The term that the Jews developed was what we would call ionization, and that meant to go the way of the Greeks, to assimilate. And the problem of assimilation was not always an issue of violence or persecution, but it was an issue of intermingling of cultures, assimilating into other cultures, and dropping Jewish culture. So there's a long, extensive history, but for long, Jews have been living on the Mediterranean basin since antiquity. They have been part and parcel of the Mediterranean commerce. Right now, when the Romans took over, Jews partially assimilated and then also rebelled. And these rebellions became very infamous. Now, for Christian audiences, they might be aware of Titus and Titus bringing down the temple, Titus forbidding the rebuilding of the temple. And then under Hadrian, you had the Bar Kokhba revolt. And the end result of that was due to a mass Jewish uprising across various Roman provinces. Jews were forbidden from returning to their homeland, and you had the birth of the modern Jewish diaspora, stretching all the way from Spain to India. And this is an important distinction. Now, you might hear, your audience might hear the phrase Ashkenazi, Sephardi. Well, these are the two main Jewish groups. There's also Mizrahi. These were the Jews that remained in the region of the Levant in Asia Minor. The Sephardi were the Jews that went and migrated to the Iberian Peninsula, where they adopted a Romanized language that they held on to. It's called Ladino. The Ashkenazi were Jews that went north of the Rhine and into modern Germany and Poland, where they developed Yiddish language. And these distinctions will be very important, right? Because even today, amongst the Jewish different, you could call them cultures, but they are in a lot of sense ethnic groups. Now, what comprises Jewish identity is a much more touchy subject, and I won't go into that. But Jews who were living in Spain, they were living in Spain alongside with the Romans and the Visigoths. When the Arabs invaded, when the Moors invaded, the Islamic armies invaded, Jews initially sided with the Moorish armies because they had faced persecution under the Visigoths, where the Visigoths banned had banned Judaism finally, and they were forcibly converted. With the arrival of the Muslims, this was an opportunity for them to change the tide, and at the same time, they would assist the Franks, the Christians living north of Spain, in fighting back against the Muslims. So there was, for 1,000 years, almost not 700 years, about a back and forth between Christians and Muslims, where Jews were intermarries. This all came to a conclusion in 1492 when you had the Sephardic Jews supported the unification of Spain, and it had a major backfire effect, where Jews were forcibly assimilated in. A third of them were forcibly converted. Another third left Spain, came back, and the interactions with the converta, where you had Jews who had converted, were referred to conversos, or if they were kept their culture, Marranos. And this is again the problem of assimilation, where Jews who were forcibly converted were expected to assimilate into their older Christian communities, but the introduction of the Jewish communities caused a ripple, which brought in the Inquisition. Everyone has probably heard of Christopher Columbus. He was himself Jewish. This is an
What? Wait,
important.
hold up. I always assumed he was Italian. Like,
Yes, he
what
was.
are
Yeah. Now, this is a big bombshell I'm dropping early on, but I do like to put this out there because it's not widely discussed. But the person who I credit most to understanding this idea was Simon Wiesenthal. Simon Wiesenthal is a very important character in modern Jewish history. He's a man that claims to have been to multiple concentration camps. He's a man who, after the Second World War, was a Nazi hunter. He tracked down Eichmann, he tracked down other Nazis, and helped bring them over to Israel to face trial. Now, he had spent 4 years in Spain in the Madrid archives, where he was looking to find a Jewish hero. And now there have been rumors prior to him about Christopher Columbus's origins. Now, long story short, he was most likely a Jew born in Portugal. And the Jews living in both Spain and Portugal were aware that they were coming to a problematic, like very much today. They realized that their time was ticking. Won't go too much into that, but you had basically after 1492 the expulsion of Jews, and that was in Spain, and then 1496 the expulsion of Jews in Portugal. Jews from that point on, the Sephardi Jews went into Northern Europe. They also went into North Africa. They also went into the Ottoman Empire. From Portugal, they also went to the Netherlands, where often the Sephardic Jews had, they had knowledge of the Portuguese and the Spanish colonial empires. In fact, they were very much involved with those. And from this knowledge, they were able to assist the Dutch in establishing colonial enterprises in places like Suriname. They initially helped the Jews did help the Dutch take over Brazil for a period of time. The Marranos, who were the crypto Jews who were expelled pretty much from Spain, like they kept on the facade of Catholicism until a later time. Now, you might be surprised to find that Jews were living in Brazil until the Portuguese were able to take it back, where they next went to the community of New Holland and New Amsterdam, which would become New York City. So Jews have been living in NYC since 1644, I
you?
believe. Yeah. Now, several years later, you had a prominent rabbi from the Netherlands who was a colonial plantation owner in Suriname, who his name was Manasseh ben Israel. And he approached Oliver Cromwell, who had recently won the English Civil War. And Oliver Cromwell could be seen as the first modern Christian Zionist. He was the one who introduced Jews back into England. And Manasseh had informed Cromwell that he was aware of a secret gold mine on the island of Jamaica, which had actually passed on to the Columbus family. Now, Columbus actually did not keep his name Columbus, and this is a big hint. The moment he entered into the formal Spanish service, he switched his name to Colons. And that's why in the Spanish world, he is known as Cristobal Colons. And in the English-Italian world, he is known as Cristobal Columbus. This is an important distinction. So eventually Oliver Cromwell invades Jamaica, and the Jews who were living there, who were settled by Columbus, and that's a whole other story I can't even get into, right? This is the birth of the plantation system for the English, right? Where England is cold as damp. They didn't know how to grow sugar. They didn't know how to convert sugar cane into sugar. The production of sugar actually was a medieval medical technique that Jews kept and transferred from India all the way across the Middle East to Europe. In fact, lemonade is probably an invention of theirs, right? Where it's like lemon juice and sugar were used as a digestion. That aside, where is this all leading to? So what we're getting at is like Jews went with colonialism. They were part of the colonial empires. They were part of the colonial enterprises. And then towards the 19th century, you had a problem, right, where Jews started actually gaining their rights. They started becoming citizens across these European states. And this is where the problem of assimilation came into. Now, uh, the next big name I want to bring up are the Rothschilds. Now, are you familiar with them?
Yeah, right. I know. Like, who isn't even just by like just hearing their name or saying their name? Like, yeah, I am familiar with them. But yes.
Okay, so the key points is that you had Meyer Amschel Rothschild, who was from a city in Germany. He had 5 sons. During the Napoleonic Wars, they were basically acting as middlemen for money transporting. So one son went to England, one son went to France, one son went to Italy, one son went to Austria, and the fifth one stayed in Germany. And what they would do was they would issue credits to each other, right, to transport money during war times, which was dangerous. So if you had one son who was living in England, he would basically give money to help fund the English armies. And then his cousins would recompense him, right? Because they would be charging interest rates. So by the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the Rothschild family were the preeminent banking family both in England and France. So between the height of British colonial empire and the height of the French colonial empire, you had one family, now 2 different branches in both sides, right? In 18 now this is where it gets really problematic. So the Sephardi Jews were different from the Ashkenazi Jews. The Rothschilds were Ashkenazi Jews, and you have
Mhm.
one character from Livorno, Italy, which was founded in the early 16th century as a refuge for Jews escaping from Spain, founded by the Medicis along the Tuscan coast. This, well, adjacent to Tuscany, right, where it was a colony of the Florentine Empire, but it was exempt from the same religious exemption. So you have this character, the Montefiore family. Now they
Mhm.
moved to England, and Moses Montefiore basically became a partner at Nathan Meyer Rothschild's banking partnership. So in the 1830s, they approached the British government on how to formally abolish slavery. Now this was a trick, right? Where
Mhm.
there was a plan, right, where they were
Mhm.
going to accumulate. Now they formed an insurance company, and it was a very, very clever trick, right, where they approached the British Empire and said, listen, we will put up 15 million pounds. We're talking in 1830s money, so this was more than the equivalent of 1/3 of the British Empire's GDP. And in exchange for this, right, you will compensate slave owners in the Caribbean. You will formally abolish the slave trade. But the people who own plantations, which did include, because at the time, right, people who owned plantations lived in England and then just used them as collateral. So when Nathan Rothschild wanted to collect debts, he didn't collect just money, he collected plantations and the people who worked on them. So when the British Empire agreed to this loan, he himself and Moses Montefiore's cousins who were living in the Caribbean and places like Jamaica were compensated. Now, they didn't just get a $15 million loan, right? It was a $15 million loan plus interest, at one point that was not paid off until 2015, meaning that if you were from the Caribbean and if you moved to England and you were paying taxes, you were paying for the abolishment of slavery nearly 200 years on. So
Wow.
yes, this is now. What did Moses do with his? Because he retired shortly after, because he had very good investments. Now his cut. Now he didn't actually have some go on to help
Oh.
fund the colonial projects in Australia, but Moses became a philanthropist. And he was the first to start investing heavily in the Jewish communities in the Ottoman Empire in what was Palestine today.
Mhm.
And his projects, they were not formally Zionism. Again, when his philanthropy, he did start the idea of Jews like actually going back to England, because this was the birth of the steamships, where it was possible at that time to more easily go to the Holy Land, right? And Moses lived to be at a very old age. He died in 1880. I can't remember the exact year.
It looks like it says 1885. I pulled up like his Wikipedia just so people
Yeah,
could like put a little face to who you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
July 28th, 1885.
Now, 5 years prior to the death of Moses Montefiore, in France, you have a very important character in the development of Zionism, probably the most important character who does not get mentioned enough, Edmund de Rothschild. Now,
Mhm.
this is where it gets. This is where I come into some problems with my own researching because there's some obfuscation on the part of the Zionists, obviously. So in 1880, and this is a very important part. So in Israel, there is a town, Caesarea. It's actually an ancient town going back to antiquity, but to this day, Caesarea is the only place in Israel that does not have a town council. It's actually run as a private corporation, and the corporation is its main benefactors and the people who basically run the city is the Edmund de Rothschild Foundation, which is currently headed by Edmund's would be his grandson's wife and the actual Rothschild who died of a heroin addiction. And now his wife, Ariane the Rothschild, who converted, who herself used herself as a global citizen. The Rothschilds and the Israelis have a bit of a they argued about taxes, which is very funny, but they basically own the city in Israel. Now
Mhm.
Edmund in 1880 was now you can go onto the Caesarea town website, right, where you can look up Caesarea, the Edmund Rothschild Foundation, right?
Uh-huh.
And they will go into detail about some of his accomplishments, but then they obfuscate it, right? Where he's like on their own. So you'd think they'd be a little more accurate. And there's a great website for people who want to find out more. It's the Rothschild Archives. And it's the
Mhm.
actual family's archives that people can access for a lot of the primary source material. Now, I do run into some problems, right? And problems begin with the story, right? Where it's like we are told that in 1882, a group of Jews made it upon themselves to go to the Holy Land to establish the first agricultural settlements in the region, right? Because at that
Mhm.
point, Jews had kind of formally abandoned farming, and they wanted to set up a colony outside of Jerusalem, which at the time was a very small backwater town of like mainly 5,000 Jews. And they did not want these people there because at the time, because of guys like Moses Montefiore, they were living on basically charity from abroad. And their fear was if you start farming, our rich benefacting Jewish banking dynasties in Europe are going to stop sending us money. So we want you
Mhm.
out of here, right? And instead, they moved to the coast, right? Around where modern Haifa is, where they established the first Zionist colony, Rishon LeZion, first city of Zion, right?
Mhm.
Where they chose a horrible area to start an agricultural. It was sandy coastal area, and they had to hand dig just to accumulate enough drinkable water, nothing for agriculture. In 1882, Edmund provided 25,000 francs to help bring in heavy machinery to dig wells. He basically formed his own vineyard colony, right? Where
Mhm.
all of the land that was owned, starting with 800 acres, and then it was more and more and more and more and more, technically all belonged to one man. And the reason why he did this was it says on their own website that he was approached by the chief rabbi of Paris, but this is completely incorrect, right? Because in another document that I had to pull up, right, he was approached by a rabbi living in Poland or towards the Poland Belarusian border, right? Who went to him and he said, is there not a more noble goal for you to help set up, a return of your people to the Holy Land? In fact, like it stated that in Rishon LeZion, the leader of the group, he actually is quoted as saying, if American blacks can go to Liberia and establish up a country, why can't we return to the homeland of our fathers? So they did not have the same Zionist ideology that would be developed a decade afterwards. So the term Zionism actually was not developed until the 1890s, right? The
Mhm.
term didn't exist. And then it was only, again, in the mid 90s that you had the famous Theodore Herzl, who would create Zionism as a political entity. He would create the Zionist organizations, right? But Edmund, the whole time, was backing the project. Like there would not be Zionism, there would not be an Israel without Edmund de Rothschild, who, towards the end of his life, put in $60 million by 1830s money, right? So you can imagine. In fact,
Wow.
when he died, I mean, like his benefactors also included the construction of Israel's current parliament, the Knesset, the National Library, and I can't remember the third building. So he basically had a hand in the formal development, not just of buying up the land, not just assisting in people and moving there, not just agriculture equipment, but actually the buildings, the very buildings that exist today, is because of one man for
Wow.
50 years was responsible for this. So Herzl played a somewhat more minor part, but he came up with the idea, right? So before it, like, what Edmund Rothschild created was a personal colony, a personal plantation, you could say, a vineyard, right? And this is where it became a problem later with the development of labor Zionism, right? Where you might hear the name David Ben Gurion, whose family moved in 1909, and he actually worked on the vineyards owned by Edmund de Rothschild. And this is how you develop labor Zionism. So you have this problem, though. It's called the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire exists. It owns the land. And at the time, Jerusalem was not the most important Jewish city in the Ottoman Empire. It was Salonika, which is modern day Thessaloniki in Greece, right? Salonika was the financial capital of the Ottoman Empire. And Salonika from 1492, remember how I brought up earlier that you had the Jews that were kicked out of Spain, the Sephardi Jews? These were the
Yes.
wealthy Jews. Yeah, now they were invited. Now there's a lot more complicated part of this history. In fact, you have also examples of proto-Zionism, where you can look up Joseph Nazi and his aunt Gracia de Nazi, right, who were in the early 16th century. They were Portuguese Jews who were crypto Jews who, after spending a few decades as some of the most wealthy banking family, because they controlled basically a silver monopoly in Portugal, which was used to buy Indian spices and then trade at an exorbitant rate in Northern Europe. Right, they were approached by the kings of Europe, France, Charles V. Right, they were basically paying off both sides, and then they went
Right.
to Italy, and then they went to the Ottoman Empire, and Joseph basically became the head advisor, and he actually helped instigate a coup, and he helped instigate a few wars. He had a very interesting life, but the most interesting part about Joseph Nazi to this day, right, is that him and his aunt were able to secure from the Ottomans, right, an area around today's modern Sea of Galilee, which became an autonomous Jewish province, right? It was basically much the way that Edmund visioned himself. That's what Joseph Nazi did nearly 300 years prior to him. Well,
Uh-huh.
nearly 400 years prior to him. So he has the distinction as being called the first Zionist. But that doesn't make sense because it wouldn't be developed later as an ideology for nearly 4 centuries. But this was the idea that Jews would eventually return to the land and they would claim it for themselves. But all the while, right, you have this pesky problem of the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1892, 400th anniversary, right, Salonika is the home base of the CUP, which is the Young Turks and the Turkish nationalists who would visit, would have the last Ottoman Sultan, the last Caliphate visit, right? And then a few years later, he was visited by Theodore Herzl, who allegedly offered him 100 million in gold to buy up the land of Palestine, and he's rejected. Now, unfortunately, Herzl died in 1904, or was it 1906? Anyway, so, but this is where it gets really interesting because in 1908, there is
Mm-hmm.
a uprising in Salonika where it said that there was a CUP uprising that was going to march on the Ottoman capital of Istanbul, Constantinople,
Uh-huh.
and the Sultan stepped down. It was almost a bloodless coup. It was the final death of the Ottoman Empire as a caliphate, as a united Muslim empire, and you had the establishment of the Young Turks. Now, the Young Turks basically ran a triumvirate. You had three heads of state, and two of them were very, very friendly to the Zionist cause.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next is you have an outbreak of World War I in 1914. Now, the situation quickly deteriorated across the Ottoman Empire, and before you know it, you have the British enter in 1917. You have the Balfour Declaration.
Yes.
The Balfour Declaration was addressed to a Rothschild. Was it Edmund? No, it wasn't. It was his cousin, Walter Lionel Rothschild, living in England. So the question is, why was it that the letter was addressed to Walter and not his cousin? Well, his cousin was officially British, and he himself was a big Zionist. And now Walter would be a very, very close friend and ally with Chaim Weizmann. After Herzl died by 1910, Chaim Weizmann became the head of the World Zionist Organization. He had very close ties with the British cabinet, right, including the then Prime Minister during the war, David Lloyd George, right, along with other people in the cabinet who were Zionist Jews, who were able to, as early as 1915, agitate for a recognition of this is even before the British had actually taken the territory from the Ottomans, right? Where they had basically told the Arabs, right, if you help us, if you rise up against the Ottomans, we will guarantee you a sovereign state. That was all a trick. That was all a plot. And this is where it's like after the war, right? The British now have officially recognized a mandate of Palestine, which is divided between a Jewish side and a Palestinian, well, an Arab side, right? Where it's like the term Palestinian was continuously used up until 48 to refer to both Jews and the Arabs, right? And the problems quickly became from 1920, right? Where the Arabs started revolting in certain regards. So this is where you have probably the most important figure today on the right side of Zionism, revisionism Zionism, where you have Zev Jabotinsky. Now, Zev Jabotinsky was basically telling his more liberal Jewish colleagues that, listen, the Arabs are going to resist. We're a colonial project. We cannot expect them to lay down. And Zev is a very important figure because he was a mentor to a man that people might know, might not, Benzion Netanyahu, but who lived to be 102. And Benzion is the father of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, I'm like,
yes.
Bibi.
Yeah, dear Bibi. Now, Benzion was a historian, and he was not friendly to the Arab side. He, from his earliest writings, basically said, we need to expel the Arabs. We need to create a greater Israel project. And, right, he had a very long career. But during the 30s, Benzion, at the behest of Zev and others, went to America to try to influence the Americans to, recognize what would become Israel. Now, at the same time, in America, now, in the 1880s, this is an important part, right, where Jews start leaving Eastern Europe, and there's a lot of misconceptions about that. Like, there are said to be pogroms, but that's a whole other can of worms to deconstruct over. But during the 1880s, you had millions of Jews leaving the Russian Empire, and they went to places like the United States, or a vast majority of them went to NYC. Now, not all of them left due to persecution, etc. Some of them just left for economic. Most of them left for economic reasons. Some of them were more wealthy. And amongst these figures from Austria is Rabbi Stephen Wise. Rabbi Stephen Wise, who would become a very close advisor to Louis Brandeis, who would be the first Jewish Supreme Court justice. Now, Brandeis has a college named after him, Brandeis College. Brandeis had Zionist meetings in his office as a judge, which would be seen as unthinkable today, but he was acting as a political operator while holding his position as the Supreme Court justice. Now, Rabbi Wise was head of the Zionist organization. Now, you had the American Jewish. Yep.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Brandeis was one of our Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. And he was
Felix,
all into this, trying to make Israel like a thing, right? Like,
yep. He was an ardent Zionist. Wow. Yeah.
So
remember,
this just.
Yeah. This is going. Now, Rabbi Wise, all right, as head of the American Zionist organization, the American, you had these sister organizations, right, that would evolve into what would become AIPAC. Now, AIPAC is the main Zionist lobby today in America, right? You maybe yourself and your audience have probably heard the phrase AIPAC before. Now, just even in, what was it, yesterday, it was announced that AIPAC would be using $100 million to destroy the Squad. That is
AOC. AOC in them.
Yeah. Now, the AIPAC, and this is where we are finally getting into the part of like how Zionism is able to influence and dominate America, right? Where the actual among Zionism amongst American Jews actually took a much larger time. Same with British Jews and others, right? But
AIPAC was the means for them to secure control politically, system capture, right? Where it's like they're almost involved, not just in every election on a House level in the US House of Congress and House of Representatives, but they work across the board down to the municipal level and corporate levels. And
Right.
what, yeah. Now, so them pledging, like they have, I think, a war chest of like 300 million plus per year. Depending on circumstances, they can raise a lot more, right? Where I'm trying to remember but I guess the most important thing is that like just the idea that this one group is able to use $100 million to basically ensure that 4 people cannot be elected back into office.
Well, it's not even just 4. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 7 of them. It's 7 of them. And the thing is, not to like, cut you off. My gosh, my hand is like hitting everything and then stop sharing. But the crazy thing is that the fact that we even had like, believe me, what the squad for the most part, I am not that radical progressive. I'm not a Democrat at all, right? But at the same time, I feel some type of way that this super PAC can just be like, guess what? You're next. Wow.
Yeah. And
Okay.
they are an effective foreign lobby, right? That is exactly what they are, right? And
Yes.
there have been challenges to them to get them to be recognized as a foreign agents group. Now, this is again like the problem what we're facing to this day, where it's like again like you have people who have obvious foreign loyalty interests.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain to somebody who is a complete outsider? How do you get them to like? It's difficult. I can't necessarily provide a solution, but we're living in very interesting times where previously communications were limited to radio, newspapers, television, very, very strongly regulated, controlled mediums. Right now, people can go on to Twitter, they can go into space. They don't even have to go into Twitter, but it's like this is the most effective means of communication.
Yeah.
And like again, people are starting to get wise now. I maybe should I touch on the ADL maybe a little because they're in effect.
Yeah, whatever you have time for, like give us all the nuggets you can give, like what I mean? Yes, definitely, because it's all connected. So
yeah, and this actually ties in perfectly because you have everyone's familiar with LBJ, Lyndon Johnson now. Lyndon Johnson's family were Christian Zionists. Now, you do have in the 19th century a strain of Christian Zionism that would, the Zionists would eventually adopt and push themselves. Now, Rabbi Weiss was the first major rabbi in America to push the idea that Jesus was actually a good Jewish scholar, which caused him hell because, for the most part, Orthodox Jews and like Jews throughout history hated Jesus. They hated Jesus. The Talmud specifically says that Jesus is boiling in excrement. Right. So, but that was Rabbi Weiss in the 30s. Now, today, Bibi Netanyahu and the Zionist Licudists, who are fiercely anti-Christian in Israel to this day, they love evangelicals. Bibi in his most recent book, he talks about going to Brazil and like what was a previous Catholic majority country is now having this groundswell of evangelicalism. Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, his wife was an evangelical Zionist, and he himself is a bit of a Zionist. But when Bibi landed there, he was greeted by all like these Israeli flags, and he even says in his book, the Bible, the gospel, can be a very useful tool for us.
You see, and that's what I mean. And again, not to cut you off, like that's what I'm saying to people. Like, yo, this is a person still. Like, this is a person. I don't. So my religion is considered a Protestant religion. I'm not Catholic. I'm Seventh Days Adventist, but we don't do all of this extra stuff. We follow the Bible. Obviously, we're not out here saying people should be treated wrong for who they are. Absolutely not. But this notion that like we need to look to Israel for salvation, it's completely antithetical to what a Christian should be talking about. Our Savior is supposed to be Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? Like that's what I was last taught. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Tertullian in the first century is first second century is writing the same problem that he was experiencing, where he's one of the early church fathers, and he's noticing that you would have Christians who would become so obsessed with understanding like the old laws and the covenant that they themselves just converted to Judaism at the end of the day.
Jesus.
Yeah, and now like there are people who could explain this much better than me, but like the main branch that started off the Christian Zionism in America was actually the Southern Baptists, and I can't go too much. Yeah, I can't go too much into detail about that because it's not my wheelhouse. But going back to Lyndon Johnson and his family, the evangelical Zionists. Well, I don't actually know if they would be classified as evangelical, but his grandfather, right, LBJ's, who was a lawyer, right, who was also in attendance to the court trial of Leo Frank, and as a support. Now they were from Texas, and for those of you in your audience that might not be familiar, and it would have been in 1910, you had the trial of Leo Frank down in Georgia. Now, Leo Frank, who was from NYC, he was a officer in B'nai B'rith, which is it's basically the large Jewish social club, social network that exists to this day. Now, Leo Frank was a manager at a pencil making factory, and he one Saturday he was at the plant, and there was a young girl, Mary Fagan. Now, this is a time when you had young people, young children working in factories. So you had this 13-year-old girl who was there to collect her wages that were back owed to her. And she was later found in the basement of the building, found to have been raped and strangled. Right. Now,
yes, I've heard the story.
Yes. Now, Frank was immediately considered suspect because he was at the plant. He was the last person to be seen with him. And so when he went to trial, the trial was a major like hubbub amongst the Jewish community, because again, this was an officer of B'nai B'rith. He had been accused of raping and murdering a 13-year-old Catholic girl. So what ended up happening during the case itself was very much a fiasco, where his defense teams basically said, because like the prosecutors brought in multiple witnesses who were the factory is largely employed by women. And they all were repeating the claims that Leo Frank fondled them, sexually harassed them. And the defense basically said, Your Honor, I can't believe my Southern people are so prudish, right? They didn't even deny that he was handsy and whatnot. And their main defense was basically blaming the illiterate black janitor. Two black guys, actually.
Right. And, yeah. I did hear this story. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, there's an even funnier story where I know I might be getting a little sidetracked, but I do like bringing this up, right? And the New York Times, which was owned by T. Oakes, the Oakes family, who were Jewish, who were pro-Zionist, right? They reluctantly kind of pushed, like, here's the thing. They all knew Leo Frank was guilty. They all knew. They all knew that, right? But the New York Times actually put up photos, but they actually had to retract it, and they're in storage. But I remember seeing them being taken out of a box on video by the descendant of Mary Fagan, who's actually named Mary Fagan, right? Where they were going to put in the newspapers, right? This showing how the murder happened, and they had like this a photo of like this white guy in blackface. Showing him strangling Mary Fagan, and it was so over the top.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I know the kind of like old pictures. I can imagine exactly what this is.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, this is how it happened.
Yeah,
this is exactly how it happened. Right. And so like Leo Frank was he had his sentence commuted from death sentence because he was guilty as hell. Everyone knew it. To because of the pressure of B'nai B'rith and others, right? To get him, a life sentence. And the relatives of Mary Fagan and others basically broke into the jail, took him out of the jail, and they lynched him. Right. So from right now, immediately members of B'nai B'rith said that this is basically this is blood libel, and that this is defamation. They formed the Anti-Defamation League,
Right.
right? And for
Yeah.
decades on, their main mission that like they've made movies, they've made plays like this past year, right? In 2022, they had a stage play in Broadway about Leo Frank being innocent. And it's like the most campy thing because it's part of a myth. Now, it's very much akin because like the Zionists bring up like two very important cases, right? The one in the end of the 19th century is the trial of a French artillery officer, Alfred Dreyfus, right? Alfred Dreyfus, who was from Alsace, which was a city, which is a city between Germany and France. It's now part of France, but in the 1870s, it was taken during the Franco-Prussian War by Germany. Now, Alsace had a very large Jewish population. Now, the Dreyfuses kind of went in both directions. You had the Dreyfuses who went over to Germany. You had the Alfred Dreyfus who went over to France. Julia Dreyfus, maybe a lot of people know from watching Seinfeld, is an actual family member. Yeah, small world. Very small world. And Dreyfus was accused of leaking secrets, and many, like you had Jewish authors at the time, right? That this was basically a blood libel, a pogrom against this worthy Jewish officer. Now, from what I've done on my research, he seemed, and he's most likely to have been, like, he was an artillery officer who was selling information to the Germans on, like, French artillery components, and that is what ended up getting in trouble. Now, the main proponents on the Alfred Dreyfus side was, you had a atheist guy who would later on become the president of France, and his newspaper, which was staffed by Alsatian Jews. So they used the example of Alfred Dreyfus, who Herzl used as an example of why Zionism was important, because Zionism proclaims that Jews can only be true citizens of the Jewish state, and they can never, ever be citizens of their host countries.
Right.
Now, this is problematic today because, and I think I'll use this just to wrap this up, right? You now have the IHRA definition, and this is probably the most, like, beyond AIPAC, beyond the ADL, the IHRA, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is actually based in Europe right now. It was, like, the project started in England by a number of people who have now been given titles and whatnot, who are now lords and ladies of, right, who are basically creating a definition to the benefit of Israel. And the reason why it's important, right, the IRHA definition of anti-Semitism means that you cannot say that Israel explicitly is a racist country, a settler program, or an apartheid state. You can also not accuse Jews as working as a group to the benefit of Jews or Israel as a whole.
Right.
And you can, so Herzl, Herzl said that Jews cannot be considered citizens of any state they live in. The IRHA definition says, well, if you accuse them of that, that's anti-Semitic. So, now the main program with the IRHA definition, now they make it, they have a website, you can look it up, right? They say that it's a non-legally binding definition. Well, how is that important? Well, if you get states, and it can be, like, for example, if you were in America, you can get individual states to recognize it. You can get federal government entities to recognize it. And then you can go from the state to the county to the town level. And then it's not even just limited to actual governance. They will get institutions, specifically large corporations, NGOs, and most importantly, universities. Now, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in America, wherever it is, where the IRHA definition, which is not necessarily adopted by every institution yet, but there has been pushback from some universities, but those are falling dominoes right now. What it means is that if you are a pro-Palestinian activist, or if you're just mildly critical of the state of Israel, and if you want to write a paper about it, you only need one formal complaint.
Yep.
You only need one complaint from one Jewish student or one group that's acting on behalf of Jewish students, right, to file a complaint with the university. And if they accept this definition, then they are obliged to respond to it and to adopt it and to, like, respond to, like, the claim that there has been an anti-Semitic incident, which can be so broadly defined, right, that if the university doesn't, like, immediately address the case, that's grounds for lawsuit. And because they adopt, like, this definition, they will lose. And if it's adopted at the state it doesn't matter if you have free speech in America. If your state or your county or whatever has adopted the RHA definition, you will lose. Free speech be damned. And that's why you have guys like Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's enacting more serious anti-Semitism as a felony in the state of Florida, where it's like based on like whatever group, be it B'nai B'rith, be it whatever Israeli actual lobby, if they accuse somebody of being an anti-Semite, it's over for them. So I think I think I've said enough. You got any last questions, comments?
No, it's just thank you, because you gave us like the like the full rundown and how this all comes together and makes sense. And to even add to like that last part you said, this is what made me start really paying attention, like, wait, what's going on here? And I'm not gonna make this story too long, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I was a leftist on like the racial aspect of leftist. Like I was not extreme too, by the way, because I was blessed to grow up during a time where they still taught the Constitution in school. So I understood free speech, the First Amendment. So I always kept this thing in my mind, like, well, KKK members or white supremacists, they could say whatever they want. I just don't have to listen because that's their, First Amendment right, So, and now, of course, as I'm older, and realizing that a bunch of propaganda and everything were, I was falling into a bunch of lies or whatever, I've, of course, become a different person. So I've gone through this whole like self, like realization, reflection, like not everything is racism, Casey. Not everybody is racist. Like it's like a thing you have to like take out of your system and everything, right? Okay. So, and I feel like I've done that. And I feel like I've even said, and I was a 90s kid. So I used to see a lot of different kind of posters or ads or whatever. And I lived in Florida and it didn't ruin my day. Me and my brother would be like, oh my God. And then that's it. We'll move on. So I've always kind of been like that with speech, with talking about, whatever. I was like, you don't have to like me because I'm black. You can hate me because I'm black. Like it is what it is. That's your business. Right. So, okay. So now it feels weird that you go through all this. Now I have this channel and I talk about the anti-whiteism, that's what we call it. Like this is a thing in America. I'm very like afraid of the articles that say there are too many white pilots, because I'm like, bro, I don't care what the pilots look like. I need the best ones up there because what's going on. Like I don't like this kind of talk. So I call it out. You go through all that, you do all that, right? And then one day I think it was April, I looked again and Ron DeSantis had flew over to Jerusalem and signed a hate speech law for Florida. And I'm like,
signed it in Israel. Yeah.
Yes. Like, it's like, is any conservative going to talk about this? I'm like, this is completely against everything American. It was done in a foreign country. Nobody had anything to say. So I brought it up on this channel. I mean, it's not like I have millions of people watching me, but I'm grateful for anybody who watches. But anyway, so I was like, I have to talk about this because then I'm not having any integrity if I don't. And people need to know, like, yo, they are secretly writing hate speech laws. And then Biden had the national strategy for anti-Semitism. And I'm like, bro, how many more regulations on speech are we going to have? And nobody is giving any pushback to this stuff. And then now look, they adopt this IHRA definition of anti-Semitism to the point now where, and this happened today and I'm bringing it full circle. So I go, not even just today, like, but I had went on DeSantis space. I go on DeSantis spaces a couple times, like, just to give the pro-Trump, whatever. But, and he's done some stuff too with this too, by the way. But going to another country and signing a hate speech law is just crazy to me. But excuse me. I went on a space one time and I brought this up to them. I'm like, this is free speech. This is before the attack. And so I'm like, this is free speech. It's going against free speech. They're saying that if it's for private property, and if somebody leaves, intimidating litter on somebody's front door or whatever on their property. And I'm like, do you know that Jehovah Witnesses, they drop off tracts in people's homes, and
I had
I've
not
been
thought of that before. Yeah, that could be
yeah, so
considered anti-Semitic.
yes, because especially, you know why it clicked to me, because and of course, and at the time I was like, no, I don't think people are that fringe, but I was like, but it doesn't matter. It still gives the opportunity, especially since I had somebody tell me your Christianity is based on anti-Semitism, and I'm like, my Christianity is based on Jesus Christ and the Lord. Like that's, like that. I don't know who you are, but that's what it's based on. And so I'm like, guys, like this is, and they're like, oh no, but the Jews need to be protected, and I'm like, bro, wait a minute, I'm a black woman in America telling you no hate speech law at all. I don't want it at all. Then after the attack, I was told that I just hate Jewish people. Today I went on I went on a space with one of these people, one of these big deal accounts. She called me the B word about 3 times. All I was doing was asking what happened on the 7th, as in not like, oh, was there an attack? You think I'm gonna run up on a Jewish space and be like, the attack didn't happen? That's crazy, right? No, but I was like, where did BB drop the ball? I want to know, my tax dollars are going into this, like, and everybody's telling me I'm going to need him when Hamas comes to America. So I just, I want to know, like, have we fixed the problem yet? Right. I think I can ask that question. And I got called all kinds of B's and everything else for that. And I'm like, you just solidified my point. And the point that I was saying was, I don't think that it's right to call somebody a label simply because they're asking a question. And she solidified the point that I was making. And it goes back to that. It's like, Israel is a foreign nation, period. So we wouldn't be happy with all of this Chinese influence. So why is this any different?
You're exactly right. And I do want to bring up one more point, because you just triggered something in my head, right? Stephen Wise, right? Rabbi Stephen Wise, he was pro, like, Jewish dominance over the Holy Land. He wanted to, like, deal with the Arabs, right? He, along with Felix Warburg, were founding members of the NAACP. Now, what's very interesting is that the NAACP didn't have any black executives for decades. In fact, it was all basically run by Jews for decades. Yeah, it's like, And they brag about how Jews founded the NAACP and they ran it, but they don't want to say, well, we didn't let any blacks, like, control it to this day. And it's kind of like how the ADL says we're an anti-hate group, we're pro diversity and equity and inclusion, but there's no black people at the ADL head. Yeah, yeah. It's like, can you explain that?
Absolutely. And just to even hit that point, and this could branch off into another hour, so I'm not but yeah, once you start, and then of course, because then I start doing my research, I'm being told I can't ask questions, but you're still trying to find out what's going on about everything, about the stuff that you were taught in school, and then you find out, yeah, the NAACP was started by, listen, and one more disclaimer, this is not about Jewish people. We're talking about the Zionistic, like, ideology. We keep calling it everything else but what it is. We call it Marxism, communism. No, this to me is the head of the snake of all of this other stuff that we're talking about. But yeah, black, NAACP, and I'm like, blacks are the foot soldiers of Zionism in many different ways. That if we were, I have to actually a lot different day talk about it, but it clicked in, and let me be clear, you have to know not to sell yourself or your culture. You should hold on to yourself and culture. Nobody should buy you, period. So I'm not even as mad as the Jewish or the Zionists, for having that happen, right? Because you were supposed to say, nah, I'm good. That's the whole civil rights movement. Me, when I look at it again with different eyes, it was for something else, and blacks was for something.
I mean, you're exactly right. And I will say this, it's like, the perfect instrument, the way that the Zionists want to use black Americans today, they were happy to use Englishmen and Canadians and Australians as literal foot soldiers in 1914 and in 1939. And Winston Churchill, ardent Zionist, throughout his very young years, his own father, right, all backed by the Rothschilds, all backed by the Sessions, he never had enough money in his life. He was basically getting money from the same little group, the little cabal, right? And he wrote a paper in 1920, right? And it was this is after the Bolsheviks had taken over Russia. They had instigated a civil war at that point, and he basically said Jews have two options. Zionism or Bolshevism, right? And like that paper to this day is like kind of like hidden on the shelf, right? And they don't like to talk about it, but they make Churchill out to be the ideal Englishman. He's a perfect nonsense, right? They love creating these myths about like it's all Hollywood. It's all Hollywood.
Because I've gotten to the point where sometimes I'm like, put the phone down or put the paper down or stop reading. Just go outside and get back into reality because it's just a little too much all at once. But I've gotten to the point where even a Martin Luther King, who all my life is, Martin Luther King made the speech. And I'm like, now I look a little bit deeper and I'm like, he was a foot soldier too. For Zionism, he absolutely was. He didn't even believe in the resurrection. And this man was supposed to be some big reverend. He didn't believe in it. He was an actor too.
Yeah, it
is what it
Mr. Levy who wrote the "I Have a Dream" speech. Mr. Levy, like really, like he wrote the draft speech for that. It's like, wow, that's the thing that we all have to remember. And it was written by a Jewish guy. It's kind of like Black Panther. Everyone was saying, "Oh, it's the iconic black super," written by like Stan Lee, who was Jewish. It's like all these little like things. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, it's clicking now. It all clicks.
And then if you have to act like you don't notice, because if you notice, you're somehow a bad person. Although I have to tell you, the moment you get lobbed a bunch of labels and names, and you just become desensitized to it, where you're like, okay,
yes, and that's what they fear. The noticing. It's like it's so funny bringing that up because like there's like of course a meme across the internet, but especially Twitter, where it's like you'll have guys who are like, you'll have people whose handles is like noticer 6000, right? Or it's like I am noticing, and it's just like it's pattern recognition, and they are. Like one of the things that drives me, I know we're going probably a little longer than we're talking about, but like the thing is with me, when I'm trying to actually argue with like the actual Zionist Jewish scholars, they really don't expect you to actually read the source material for like what they're arguing for. It's just like, no, I'm noticing a pattern here. I can recognize like a plot when I see it with my own eyes, when you have documentation to prove it, and you don't want us to see it. It's like, it's infuriating.
Right. And then what I'm noticing now too is the emotional reaction. Like, I tell Black folk all the time, I'm like, yo, stop. Like I say it on my chat, like, yo, not everything is racist. Stop calling people names. First of all, you're never gonna get your point across when you yell at people or tell them, all kinds of whatever. Call them names as soon as they ask a question or say they hate you because they're Black. You're Black. It just makes you look silly. Literally, but this group is doing. I mean, it's to the point. Well, and I can't. We know it's not everybody, right? And you have like Norman Finkelstein, who's like, his name is all over the place now because he's talking about the Palestine, the Gaza situation. Because this man had talked about it for many, 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 many years, and so now he's debating another Jewish guy who's saying like, and not to get into that war itself, it was just a conversation as an example. And the guy says to him, like, because the guy's like, why don't the other Arab countries want Arab countries want them, and why don't they want it? And he's like, the same reason why people didn't want the Jews back in 1920. Like, so that's what he says. And then the guy says,
it is what it is, right?
Yeah. And this is the Finkelstein. And then the Jewish guy says to him, like, you just hate me because I'm Jewish, huh? What?
It's like Gilad Atzmon, who was a big influencer. Gilad Atzmon, who, again, Jewish, Israeli born, he helped me overcome a lot of mental barriers. And like the thing is, like, you can read all this stuff, but you are going to, like, a lot of people, there is mental barriers that they put up, right? Otherwise, logical, sane people, when you introduce them to actual facts and information, it doesn't necessarily go through. And believe me, it's a very close problem to me. It's a very, very, and my family, right? It's just like, wow. to be like people to be told by people you respect that like you're crazy, it's like this, is it's like, I'm trying to be real with you. I'm trying to have a conversation with you. And it's just like, it's so painful, but it's like this is a problem for everybody of every background, and some people have it, maybe more people are more receptive, and the problem I think is definitely smart people, because if you're dumb, you can be presented information, it's like, oh, I guess that other stuff was wrong, but like smart people will put up the most barriers to accepting new information.
Okay, like, and I mean, people I respect. I could, we could go on and on, right? But people I respect, like, and I still listen. It's a lot. The cognitive dissonance of having to peel back a bunch of layers of trust and allegiance or whatever it is that they do. It's ingrained in their blood. A lot of these people, because a lot of these people are Christians and they've been taught this thing like you must protect. Now, let me be clear. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, and I think that we should protect life. Period. Yes, like as a whole, like I would not want some nuke to go on Israel. And I'm not here asking for that to be dismantled. Absolutely, it's already here. This happened before I got here, but it's the ideology that's taken over my country, my government. Literally, they run the government. And when you say that, people say, "What do you just hate Jews?" No, I'm just showing you there's a lobby, and I'm having these Christians who I'm like, and they're like, oh, well, the protests are nothing but Antifa. Yeah, they must have just paid for Antifa to come do the protest. And I'm like, no, it was a Jewish group called Jewish Group for Peace, and Jews for Peace. And they're like, oh well, they're just like Christians. There's some Christians who believe in abortion. It's like, oh, those aren't they're not Jewish enough. Like, this is a lot of mental gymnastics, people.
Yeah.
Like,
Today I was arguing with like Tommy Robinson, like I don't want to spend too long, but he's like kind of the arc puppet of the Zionists, and I like he was maybe less obviously so a decade ago, like when I was in high school, but like since then he's come out more and more obviously pro-Zionist, and it's like today I finally got him to respond because he was shilling for his book, and I was saying, listen, are you even going to address the original issues about grooming gangs, or are you just talking about anti-Semitism and pro-Zionism today? And he responded, and the only reason I do this, I don't do this to actually get a reaction out of him. I do it for his supporters, and it's like, because I was there. I was there with you. I want you to see the light. Take my hand. I will walk you across. I put out the information. But like, again, it's like I had the same problem with you. Otherwise, sane, rational people, they won't look at it. They have their guy, and they're like, they just take marching orders from him. But he's not giving them orders. The people that are paying him are giving you the orders, and you don't see it. And that's what makes it so sad. It's so sad because they control both sides of the argument. And it's like you're arguing with theater.
Yes, you're right, and I think for just to even end this, the conversation, I know I'm gonna go ahead and let you go, and then I'll be jumping over to that space probably in like another 30 minutes. But just my issue, I can understand though. I give grace, of course, like because God gives me grace. So I give grace to the people who really just don't know information, because I was there too. There was a lot of things I thought I knew, but I didn't know. But I don't give grace to people who have huge platforms and still act like they can't see what this is. Or, I'm not saying to call out and use Zionist as a word, but they just, period, is just like, no, Israel has to do what they have to do. It is what it is. This is what it, well, we can't question Bibi. And these are Americans who, like, like they're supposed to be based. Like, why aren't you like? I'm confused. So where's the pushback? We have no so where's the opposition? I mean, Candace Owens, we see what's happening with her. I mean, she finally came. I don't even really know what she said that called for Ben Shapiro to carry on like that, to be honest.
He said, she said, blessed are the peacemakers, and you cannot serve two masters. And that's what pissed him off. That's what oh, Christians. Oh, this is why I love Nick Fuentes, because like he, again, like I think we should just end it there, because hey, maybe I don't know, maybe we'll see her on Keith Wood's show tonight. I don't know.
Right?
I don't know. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. Okay, you know what? This is great. And if you have any other questions, you DM me if you ever actually want me to go on and we go into individuals. There's so much in between all these periods and epoch, and there's so much to cover. We could spend hours on it. So let's divide it up in another time. Thank you. Bless you. Have a great night.
You have a great night too, and I'll talk to you later. All right. Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Okay. General Vega's here. So listen. So so you can comment. All right, cool. I'm like, nobody's commenting. I know that like the stuff that we were talking about was pretty deep, but hold on. So I've been on, sorry guys, I'm sorry, my mouth was really dry. I've been on for about an hour. There is a huge space on Twitter tonight. I do want to get in there, but I want to go over for the last half hour about a couple things that's been happening online. The, the internet does not cease to amaze me. It is a fascinating place. Like it's like, because if you looked at my thumbnail, Bin Laden was on my thumbnail. And what a time to be alive. I'm not making jokes. Disclaimer again. I feel, you know why I'm starting to make disclaimers, but I don't stay, I'm not going to keep making them all day long. I'm just trying to be a good person and understand people's sensitivities, but I'm not going to always make a disclaimer. But I'm not making jokes about September 11th at all. However, what a time to be alive, because like I come on and Justin has lost. Text the obese. Really? Like I've been working out. I'm trying. So anyway, yeah, it's been insane. Bin Laden has been resurrected by a bunch of kids on TikTok. Uh the jokes about 9/11 that's just been wrong. Now, I wouldn't make jokes about the day 9/11. I make jokes about things surrounding it, though. The big the big lie. I mean the massive lie. Um but Ben Shapiro, of course, was going off again, and it matters, right? So I just want to show you guys like what happened. TikTok, apparently somebody on TikTok found this article from The Guardian with the letter to America from Bin Laden. And they decided to start reading it. And I guess they were shocked. They must have been shocked, like, oh my God, everything he's saying is right. And so I went back and I read, so I was like, what is this huge thing in a letter? Now I went back and I read the letter. I'm not going to read it here because they will take down my live. Okay. Because The Guardian has now taken down the letter. But I read the letter and I'm like, this is exactly what we're saying today. It's like, but he called it back in 20, I think he wrote that letter like 2008. Obama was president because he talked about Obama. And so he's like saying, you know, you guys are fighting wars. Your Congress, everything has been bought and paid for. They're not making decisions for you anymore, you know, because of the lobbyists. It's all corporate stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna get to the Candace Owens and Shapiro thing too. Trust me, we're gonna do this, okay? Like we are gonna do this. But I just wanted the Bin Laden thing. So the thing is, in the letter, he does use the J's, and he says it's because he doesn't say it's because he's like, you know, J lobbyists or like J corporations, you know, they've been doing XYZ, but he doesn't really even say, oh, but we got to get all the J's. And then I think he says, like, America needs to take Sharia law. And Sharia law means God's law. So, like, everybody calm down. Like, it's like, I just, some of this stuff be cracking me up. So it's like, it's been 15 years. Trust me, there's no God's law that we need to worry about being, you know, a systematic thing in this country. I'm not asking for it. I don't believe in church and state in any fashion. But it's not happening, right? It is at all not happening. So, but it's just funny. I mean, it's just really funny because everybody is like Ben Shapiro was in a tizzy about this. I'm gonna show you first what he had repost. You know, Ben, he's a God, guys, and he has been unhinged. Hold on. I mean, he started off early in the morning. Like, here it is. So this is like a little clip of somebody talking about this on TikTok. So it says over the past 24 hours, thousands of TikTok at least have been posted where people share how they just read Bin Laden's infamous letter to America, in which he explained why he attacked the United States. Hold on, show more. Hold on, where am I at? And and the TikToks are from people of all ages, races, and ethnicities and backgrounds. Many of them say reading the letter has opened their eyes and they'll never see geopolitical matters the same way again. Yeah, I don't need Bin Laden's letter to do that for me though. Like, but many of them, and I have watched a lot, say it has made them reevaluate their perspective on how what is often labeled as terrorism can be a legitimate form of resistance to a hostile power. So, all right, let's go ahead and see. But
This morning,
This
I
girl is
read
saying,
Letter to America,
I absolutely hate my.
Osama
Hold on
bin
a second, y'all.
Laden's
Let
letter
me.
to America
This happens
explaining
only
why
when I
he
go live.
attacked
It
Americans.
embarrasses me. Let me
And
them
I
right
am
now for
ashamed
you
to
guys.
say
Check it
that
out.
I
Last time I'm like,
not only have
it's
never
not
read
working. I
this
don't know why
letter,
it's not working.
but I
All
didn't
right,
even
here we
know
go.
this
Listen.
letter existed. It's wild, and everyone should read it. This morning, I read Letter to America, which is Osama bin Laden's letter to America explaining why he attacked Americans. And I am ashamed to say that I not only have never read this letter, but I didn't even know this letter existed. It's wild, and everyone should read it. If you haven't read it yet, read it. However, be forewarned that this has left me very disillusioned, and I feel the same exact way I felt when I was deconstructing Christianity. I feel a little bit just confused, like I have entered into another timeline. What is this? And yeah, so go read it.
So I just read A Letter to America, and I will never look at life the same. I will
Okay, all
never
right. You
look
already
at
don't. I'm sorry. I don't care. The black girl with the I don't care.
Please
Black girl
read
with the
that.
handkerchief is not.
Just need someone
Come
else
on.
to be feeling this too.
I need you to stop what you're doing
I don't
and
know.
go read a
What
letter.
do I-
Pages. Go read A Letter to America.
This is
And
a trans.
please come back here and just let me know what you think.
This is a
I feel
boy.
like I'm going
All
through
right, hold on.
Letter to America. It is literally the craziest thing I've read in a while. And while I can't say that I'm that surprised, I am pretty shocked. So go read it and tell me what you think, because I really also need to talk to other people about this. And actually, before you even read the letter, I did want to mention, in reading the letter, I could only think of this tweet that I saw the other day. Under settler colonialism, any kind of resistance is branded as terrorist because the only acceptable
Calm down a
violence
little bit.
is
Mind fucking to me that terrorism has been sold as this idea to the American people and honestly just so many Western inhabitants.
God.
Like that is the root of terrorism. It's
Okay.
My voice just wants to leave
All right, so everybody relax. It's not about, oh, Ben Laden was right too, okay? Because if we want to go with the narrative that Ben Laden was the one who did 9/11, you still have no right to end a bunch of civilians based on the fact of whatever you thought was hurting your feelings or whatever you didn't like happening to your country. You know what I'm saying? Because those citizens who went to work that day, they did not expect to. I mean, tragic, okay? Tragic, right? And there's a lot of stories around 9/11. There's a lot of confusion and questions around that. I still don't know how that third building, building 7, just went down out of nowhere. But, but the fact is, no matter how many stories or whatever confusion there is, those people did not deserve to die simply because our American establishment has been stealing our tax dollars and going and funding wars overseas. We didn't ask for that. We didn't know. We just go to work and we're trying to save our families. We're trying to raise our families. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Bin Laden is the G. Yeah. Yeah. Bin Laden is the G. Yeah. Oh man. Like, no, I'm not at all. I understand the premise because it's the same thing. You could get this. You don't need Bin Laden to tell you what is going on today. People could go back and look. And if you guys are watching, please hit the like button. I kind of want to get this out for a little bit. I have like another 15 minutes and I am going to get on the Candace Owens situation. I didn't forget. But I did a video on, it's on my catalog and Joe Rogan is on it. And he explains, you want to hear a better letter? General Wesley Clark talking about, the 7 nations that we're going to take over, Syria, Libya, Lebanon, all of them. So I think for me, that was more eye-opening than Bin Laden saying, y'all fund terrorists and then call them terrorists. Yeah, like I'm learning a lot of that this year, but I'm not going to say, oh, thanks Bin Laden for waking me up. No, you could find that information out anywhere else. So I'm not going to get all hyped about that. Nor is it going to make me look at Christianity any differently or anything like that. It's not going to be, it's not going to be, so it's not going to be that much enlightening to me. I wouldn't praise it as this great piece of paperwork. No, but it is a big foreshadowing because he basically was saying like, you're going to get caught up in big deal wars like for a long time and it's going to destroy your economy. Yes. And there were a lot of people saying that before Bin Laden was saying it. When we went to war in Iraq, there were a lot of Americans who were like, no, no, no. What are we doing? What are we doing? And they were tossed out and called hippies and fools. Me, I wasn't paying attention around that time. I think I was like 19 and 20. I had just learned how to drive a car. You know what I mean? Boys were, I had interests. So I was just like, oh, I don't know why we're over there, but hey, I guess the government understands what they're doing, right? So as an adult now, I get it. But there were people back then who were vehemently against it, and they got tossed off as kooks. And then 20 years later, some people say like, oh, we get it now. We see why people were fighting against just going into a war. But then now that Israel has an issue, everybody forgot that they even said that too. So it's just funny all around. But of course, you know, I think Ben Shapiro was going off about, he definitely was going off about this. Let's see a little bit what he says. I'm not going to watch this whole video. Just when he talks, he has to come.
Yes, bin Laden was an arch terrorist responsible for the murder of thousands of Americans. Unfortunately, to an entire generation raised on the idea that success equals oppression and failure equals being oppressed, it's not obvious at all that Osama bin Laden was evil. In fact, he was apparently an aggrieved victim with a shockingly cogent case against the West. That is according to a bevy of new videos trending on TikTok of TikTok generation Americans reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America.
And let's be real, like at this point right here, I am agreeing with Ben. Bin Laden was not a victim. Bin Laden was very rich, and he had a grudge. You know, he did not like the West, especially when we went in and we invaded Iran. I think it was like we overthrew the Iranian king, the Shah. And when people see like a lot of these women who are garbed up as Muslims and they live under this strong law, a lot of those terrorists America did fund and put them, you know, regime change for other purposes. That's a whole nother lie, but that's just the truth. But I'm not over here like bin Laden was a victim. Like this guy was insanely rich.
Letter was released in November 2002. It essentially makes the same case that radical Muslims and radical leftists now make in favor of Hamas. The West is evil and aggressive, and Westerners, including Jews, deserve what they get. It is Frantz Fanon and Jean-Paul Sartre and Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, all rolled into one. Here are some of the reactions of young people.
Right, so we're not gonna even go into that. So all right, so that's what he had to say. So he's right? Like, and believe me too, like when people say it's a shame, everything is Hamas, but I'm sure there's more people who are just saying like, just stop the carpet bombing. That's all we're asking for. But it turns into, you love Hamas. So it's extraordinary. Anybody who's rooting for Hamas is insane. I'm not, as an American, rooting for any terrorist group that my government created. Yeah. But let's go ahead and get into this Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens beef just real quick, because I think it's the most hilarious thing. Now, we will be going live on Bring the Asteroid on Friday. I have to make sure Matt knows that I am going to go live. We will be going live, so we will talk about it more. It'll be funnier to talk about it with the guys, but let's go ahead and, you know, they're obviously trending. They are trending. First, we're going to let you see the Ben Shapiro defends Elon Musk, criticism of the ADL, Progressive Jewish Organization. I don't know what Ian Miles Chong is talking about, but I want you guys to see the video of what? Oh, I don't think that. Yeah, I want you guys to see the video of Ben going off about Candace Owens. So I'm trying to get there. It has to be around here somewhere. Like, it's so annoying. There it is. So just as it is a pretty interesting beef. Let's go ahead and get into it. This is Ben going off. Yes, it's a little low. It's recorded on during this administration. Without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think she's been absolutely disgraceful. I think that her faux sophistication on these particular issues has been ridiculous. It's not faux sophistication, it's ridiculous. Everybody can see the moves that she's making, the things that she's saying, and I find them disreputable.
Well. So he said that, and then real quick, we're gonna look at Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, first of all, is he's wait, not on this. Let me just pull up his post. I want to crack you up that Tucker Carlson, he's such an instigator. He's like, I don't know what's going on. Tell me again now, what's going on between you and Ben Shapiro? And it's just the most hilarious thing to me, because it's like, Tucker, you know what's going on. I got out of work yesterday and everybody was dinging my phone like, yo, like this is crazy. And I'm like, yes, it is.
In 1616,
No, hold on.
to see yourself, look, we all get things wrong. I certainly have gotten a lot of things.
Particular issues.
Actual debate, and there always should be an actual debate on every issue.
And when they never explain what you got wrong, they don't call it wrong. They call it disinformation, which suggests it could be right. That's usually a tell. And speaking of it, so I was out of the country yesterday, and didn't have adequate internet access on the plane to really follow this. And I don't understand the context exactly, but the internet was dominated yesterday by video of Ben Shapiro, who you work with at the Daily Wire. I think it's fair to say attacking you. Here's the video. I just want to get your reaction to it.
Yes, the question is about Candace Owens. I think her behavior during this is disgraceful.
Let y'all hear it again.
Without a doubt.
Maybe you know what? Let's pause for a second. Like, all right, so he's calling her disgraceful. He says she has faux sophistication on the current topic going on. We see what she's trying to do. What is she trying to do? Okay, and be clear, I am not some big Candace supporter. I think she's done some pretty serious grifting in her life against people, like people who she used to call friends. I've seen some of the stuff that she's done. I would like to think that this girl maybe is growing up and thinking like maybe I shouldn't have did some of these things, but y'all can see my catalog and see that I am not grifting for Candace Owens. But I also respect a person who can have their own opinion on something and not be called absolutely grateful and be, accused of trying to do something. But Ben's hair is like to the side here. Maybe he had a little something to drink at this party because he had to know that this was going to come out in the morning, and it did.
I think that her faux sophistication on these particular issues has been ridiculous. It's not faux sophistication, it's ridiculous. Everybody can see the moves that she's making and the things that she's saying, and I find them disreputable.
So maybe there's a point in the video where he explains what exactly you did wrong, how you were wrong. I haven't seen it. But to call somebody, quote, absolutely disgraceful, particularly a coworker, seems like a pretty big step. What? And I really don't know the background here. What is that about?
There isn't much of a background. I saw the video when everybody else saw it when I woke up.
No one warned you about it.
Nobody warned me about it. It looks like maybe he didn't know he was being recorded. It looks like it was some sort of.
It's lagging.
I got no clarity on the issue that he was particularly speaking on, and in what was said, I can't respond to it beyond what he's saying because it's just ad hominem attacks. I don't know.
Yeah, because it's not, we disagree, or I don't think she's correct, or maybe she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, exactly. And so I can't respond to it on a level of intellect because there's nothing that he has expressed in that, at least in that short clip, that he fundamentally disagrees with in terms of what I said. But I will say that I'm not going to respond with the same ad hominem attacks. Yes. I don't think it helps further discussion. And if that was me, that was caught on a video saying that about colleagues that I work with, I would be embarrassed. So I think that the video speaks more to Ben's character than it speaks to mine.
So we'll stop there because I made videos about it. Y'all can go back and check it out. But she's right, and that's why you got to stay calm in these kind of situations. You got to stay calm in these kind of situations because you end up making a fool out of yourself. Like now, Ben looks like he's doing too much, and that's just really it. Like people are looking at him like, yo, there was no need for all of this. There really wasn't. Hold on, I'm trying to see if you guys can see the tweet. There was a tweet that really was because she responded to. Oh God, this guy, I knew he was gonna go off. Which is true. He did go up. He did. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. He responded to what she said. So let's just read this. It's just too much. Yeah, because she had made this tweet and she was saying, "Blessed are the peacemakers and the children, for they shall be called the children of God." And then she was saying like, she was saying like, you can't serve two masters. It's either God or money or something like that. I guess in a way it's like, I mean, I can't come at her for using verses instead of just being like, shut the F up, So maybe she's growing. I would like to think, because as a Christian, I want to think that somebody's growing a little bit more in their faith and they try to, use the Lord. And then in the comments of her post, she put Christ is King. I'm going to tell you that kind of bothered me that it was in the comment of her post. I think that it should have been right there on the post. And because to me, again, it's like, yo, if you're going to be petty, like if you're going to do this, do it all the way. Just do it all the way. Don't go in your comments of your post and put Christ is King. So what you were afraid that, and I didn't say this in the video. It's just like the more I'm thinking about it, it's like you were afraid that people would call you anti-Semitic for saying Christ is King. You need to let them call you anti-Semitic for saying Christ is King, because that is not anti-Semitism to say Christ is King. Okay, it's not. And we're not going to start that. The ADL is not going to even think about putting that on their platform. They're not, because I could say to you, you're not going to tell me how to worship my religion. I mean, my God. Ugh. So, anywho, so you put, Candace, if you feel that taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God, by all means, quit. Basically saying, like, I don't care about your little, your little repentance that you have right now. You can go ahead and quit. And so she says, you have been acting unprofessional and emotionally unhinged for weeks now. And we have all had to sit back and allow it, and have all tried to exercise exceeding understanding for your raw emotion. But you cross a certain line when you come for scripture and read yourself into it. I will not tolerate it. But this is what I mean. For real, this is, so now I kind of wish I would have made the video again. Because again, don't say like, yeah, he does. Ben Shapiro sits on a high horse. He does, and he should humble himself before God. But that's for him. That's his journey. I've seen some of the other stuff he said. I talk about it, so it's a little bit more like he has this kind of praise me attitude. I like a lot of the other things he say. That's just who he is, right? It is what it is. It's not like I'm saying he's the worst person. No, him and God have a journey that they need to go through. But at the same time, if you put that there for him to see it, to say, blessed are the peacemakers and everything. Don't say like, oh, you're just trying to read yourself into the scripture. You're just trying to act like it's about you. You put that there because you wanted to address him with that, right? And so what you should have said was, yeah, because I'm trying to be a peacemaker. But it's not about by all means quit. God, I'm saying I want to be a peacemaker. I don't want this to go any further. So I'm looking to the Lord to extend some grace to you and your emotions right now. Yeah, that's the point that I was making. But since you wanted to come back and say something else, now I'm going to tell you that you've been unhinged for weeks. We've been tiptoeing around you. We're afraid to talk about anything else except for Israel around you. So this is what's going on. So, I mean, because I'm sorry, Bishop ever going nuts after I said 4 weeks ago when this thing happened, I said, somebody get the phone away from Ben Shapiro. The man was just tweeting, bang, 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 left, just tweeting. Like he couldn't wait for Shabbat to be over so he could just tweet. And he at one point tweeted like the picture of the burnt, unfortunately, like there was, and it was just like, somebody was like, Ben, stop. Like it was a lot, and it's been a lot. It's all day. You're ramped up. You're hysterical. I was like, yo, somebody take the phone away from Ben. Of course, I was attacked. What do you think? He's not smart enough? What do you don't like Jews? I'm like, yo, no, I'm a psych nurse. I can see hysteria when I see it. He needs to be with his family right now. He has every right to be upset. I don't expect him to lend his empathy to Palestinians at all. I would not expect that from him at all. He needs to get off the phone for his own mental health. That's it. We are not machines. We can't just keep operating like this. So that was the point that I was making when I said that. But it's just hilarious. Like, I thought Christ is King. It's true. I can't even take it. And I have to laugh because, I just have to laugh because it's like, here we go. And people saying, people saying Christ is King are grifters. I don't want, if they're grifting with that saying Christ is King and they're grifting with that, then you deal with the grifters. You better not start with this sentence being a problem. Okay. No, those 3 words will not be a problem at all, because now I'm about to say it. And I don't want to do that with the word of God. I don't. But we're not even getting ready to start there, because I always knew it would come here at some point. But, you're going to hear, oh, Christ is King is anti. I can't wait for the first person that I see say Christ is King is anti-Semitic, it's a wrap. I will be going off like, I will go off and be like, no, I don't. Then I'll wear a shirt and say, stop playing. Let's not do that. Okay, that's all. Let's not do that. But I'm going to laugh about it right now because, and Jack Posobiec is such a grifter. Yeah, you're right. He is grifter. He's so hyped. Like, oh, great, I can say something to make people mad, but I don't have to really say something about AIPAC or Jews. And nobody needs to say anything about Jews. Nobody needs to. It's because if you understand the conflict, the situation that's happening in America, by this Zionist ideology, you understand that you're not talking about Jewish people. Because guess what? You know who are the biggest Zionists? Is Christians. Okay, Christian Zionists. Those ones I have the biggest problem with, right? So you understand that you're not disrespecting any group of people when you talk about this issue. All right, but Jack doesn't know how to get a message across, so now he's, Christ is King. Like what? Okay. Like, okay. It's just see, using Jesus to denigrate Israel is anti-Semitism. No, you could say using Jesus to denigrate Israel is ridiculous. You could say a lot of things, but we will not, and we don't. That's not what they're not denigrating Israel. It's just that people are tired though of being told what to say. They are tired of being told what to say. They're just tired. They're just tired, and y'all are doubling down and making them even more tired, Let me just see some of the stuff you guys are saying. What's up, DJ Ronnie G? DJ Ronnie G has the greatest lives. He talks about like microprocessors and macro and like computer stuff or whatever. And you think like, but in DOS, MMS DOS, and you think like, well, why is that fun? Like, no, he kills it. Like when his lives are awesome. Like you really are coasting out about some straight up like total information of how the computer works inside and out, and it's just so cool. It really, and then he brings old footage into it. Like I'm geeking hard about DJ's channel. It is awesome. His lives are amazing. Yeah, you said you had to get vibes from Islam countries where they just want beef for the sake of territorial expansion. I don't know though. Really, I'm just saying what's coming to my mind. Nah, but it's cool. It's cool that you ask questions, General Vake. It is cool. There is you know what? I'm going to find the video just to show you, and I'm not gonna play. I'm gonna put it on a link it on the chat because this gentleman who made this video talking about the basically how America stole the Middle East. And I know when you first hear it on its face, it's like, oh, here we go. They're just trying to say we're colonizers. They're not talking about me and you. This happened a lot longer than before we were born. All right. And to keep it real, like I can't go back and change things, and I like fossil fuels. So it is what it is. It is what it is. It's a terrible thing. It is a terrible thing, but I wasn't there, and a lot of people too, they were a part of it. Like it was just a lot of corruption. But I think that Johnny Harris did a good job with this, and maybe he is a now I want to say like a leftist. I can't see him being a left. He's probably a classic liberal, but I just posted the comment, the link. If you ever want to look at that, it kind of brings you into the fact is, and we can't even blame Israel for it. I don't even blame Israel, man. I'm looking at the American perspective and how we've been messing up for a long time. But the fact is, a lot of this stuff is created by American establishment, American Zionist establishment. It is like they've gone in and turn places upside down. So now again, like I say, when you see a bunch of what looks like radical jihadists, jihadi living and everything, people think like, oh, that's Islam. I used to think that too, like, oh wow, that's what Muslims do. And I used to have this really bad take on Muslims until I started talking to regular normie Muslims who don't blow themselves up and tell me that no, suicide bombings are actually haram. They are a sin, that we're not supposed to do that. The God creates you. You're not supposed to take yourself out. So, and like even Suleiman, for everybody who says like Suleiman, he's so anti-Semitic, whatever, this space is so horrible that you go on. But he explains it, and he's like, you have people who have mental health issues in any country, in any religion, who are ready to do silly things like kill themselves, And so, yeah, like this is not part of Islam. And so any Muslim that I've ever really said, and Jewish people, like I sit down with people, you know, you'll find, like I said before, the 3 Abrahamic religions, they're very much similar in a lot of ways. But then, you know, everybody radicalizes something. You know, at least if you stay in the like as much to the center of your religion, focused on God as much in your religion as possible, you don't get involved with a bunch of ideology that's brought into your religion to corrupt you and your relationship with the Lord. It's just that simple. But so yeah, but America's done a lot of crazy things. So like I was just like, wow. And then he said, this won't hurt Shapiro at all. Everyone knows he shields for Israel, and nothing has changed really low. No, yeah, and no, it's not even just shield for Israel. Like this, he has dual citizenship over there, I'm sure. And I expect him to, he's Jewish. He's like, this is, he believes in like, look, and I want them to be safe there too. I don't want it dismantled. I don't expect them to go in any other way of this conversation. But my issue is when he starts to say you're immoral because you might not like seeing the footage that's coming out of Gaza. When you hear about hospitals being raided because Hamas might possibly be there, but you never get evidence of Hamas there. They show you a few guns and say, see, this is Hamas's headquarters. And all you're looking at is like, well, when I lived in Florida, I knew people in the, you know, in the swamps who had way more ammunition than this, but okay, I need a little more. If you're going to give me this PR, I do need a little more because we're wiping away people and you're saying it's for a reason. And it's not adding up. And this is 2023. And guess what? America's implicated in it because we are involved and we have our warships, aircraft carriers, everything. Talk about this on the show. So I just ask questions now. But yeah, Shapiro, of course, you know. And then you said, I agree with that. Christ is king shouldn't be looked at as bad. Same as someone saying it's okay to be right. Exactly. Is right. Like we're not going to start controlling words. That's what we're not going to do. Can't let other people control what language. There you go with General Vague. We are not going to control words. Christ is king. Now you will make me be. And if you, soon as I get the person saying, but it's anti-Semitic, I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to look at you in your face and tell you Christ is king because you're not going to threaten me with that. You're not. Like, don't, come on, man. It's not supposed to be for that either. Like, I don't want to get indignant about things like that. That's weird. Like, it's supposed to be a feeling. When a Christian talks about Christ, it's supposed to be something that should make other people say, wow, what's that? You know, what's that about? I want to know more. I want to know why you're the way you are. Who is Christ? That's how it's supposed to be. So I don't try to do the whole, you know, I don't try to do that with scripture, but if somebody else decides to do it, scripture is not anti anything. Okay. It's not racist. It's not anything. Okay. That's the purest form of words. Like we're not doing that. But just to end off with a little bit of a story. So if y'all know me, I'm on Twitter. And on Twitter, I go on Twitter Spaces, right? And I go on like a lot of spaces. I've made some really good connections and stuff. That's how I was able to get the last guest, Anglo Acadian, who was here, who gave us a lot of information about, you know, the Jewish part of Zionism. I had did a live before about Christian Zionism. I'm trying to get more guests. I'm trying to get guests every Thursday. I want to get a guest next Thursday who's like, I want to get a pro-Israel Jewish person here. Though I don't know how that's going to work out because what happened to me today was they would have to be a man. They would have to be a man because women are crazy. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say the person's name. Not that you guys would know who she is. And she goes by some, you know, anonymous name. I'm up there with my Casey. So, so anyway, and I go on the space because I was invited by General. What happened to you today? I go up there because I was invited because this guy named Tim Cool, he calls himself Tim Cool. He says that he's like, as a Christian, I must be a Zionist. Or he said something like that. So I commented, I said, please have a space on this so I can dismantle this thinking. And then he said, okay. So they were having a space and she was there and it was like a big space. And he invited me. He sent me the link and everything. So I was like, yo, I'm here. Like I had to, you know, I had just gotten home. I was like, I'm here. I'm in. So I go in or whatever. So I'm like, yo, Tim, just tell me, what does this mean for you that you need to be a Zionist? He was like, yes, Christians are supposed to be Zionists. I said, well, why? And he said, and Tim, I don't agree with Tim on anything, but he is cordial and he's nice every time I go on his spaces. Excuse me, he's always been nice to me. So that much, we don't have to agree on a single thing, but he is a nice person to me. Okay, so he says, he's like, yeah, well, we have to. He says some law, about that Jews were scattered and then they're going to go back to their homeland and everything. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, right? That's fine. Though, from what I heard, Judaism says that the Messiah is supposed to bring them back to their homeland of Israel when the Messiah comes back. They're not supposed to go before the Messiah comes. This is Jewish people who've said this, okay? So, and they actually say it's a heresy in Judaism to say you're going to Israel to go back to the homeland, like to make it like a pilgrimage to Israel to like live there and everything. That's what they say, right? So, okay. So I'm like, okay, but there are Christians who believe that they need to be a part of getting them there and everything. He's like, so he's a little bit, he was hyped to use the word Zionist probably because he knew it would get attention. But he was like, no, I don't think there's anything we should do about that or whatever. He said, but yes, I do believe that they're the chosen people. And I'm like, but that's the thing, like the chosen people, that Jesus came through. Yeah, absolutely. But then it ends right there. If you are a Christian, you understand that the covenant that was made, that the promises that you got from Christ is that now we are all children of Israel. Like we are all, Father Abraham, like we're all children of Israel through the promise. And yes, okay, if they have a lineage and everything, I understand that, but it gets to a point when you have a group called Christians United for Israel. And it's like this big mega church, and they just like, they are almost praying to Israel. They send millions of dollars over there. There's so many, and evangelical Christians, and this is what Anglo Acadian was talking about earlier on the chat. So many evangelical Christians who they go to Israel to make sure that the Jews go there. You know what I'm saying? Like, and Benjamin Netanyahu, who's not really into Christianity, he's like, but I like these evangelicals though, because he says, he's like, when I go see them, like he's treated like the kings, right? So that's the point I was trying to make on the space. It's like people are getting distracted, but you get cut off on the space. Like other people start talking. I'm like, in Christianity, my main point was in Christianity, we cannot get so distracted where we lose the mission of God, spreading the word of the Lord of Christ, looking towards Christ. Yes, Israel is a very not even, it's a land that a lot of things happened there. But when Christ ascended up to heaven, the seriousness, like the holiness of the land, it did leave with him. It did, and it's okay. So that's my beliefs, and that's why I stay focused on the Lord. And I understand that I'm a sinner, and I'm not trying to preach, right? I understand I'm a sinner, and that I'm not any better than any other human being. We are all sinners on this earth, and our connection should be to God. And when you do that, you leave ideology out the way. That's how I stopped with the whole white privilege, and that's how I stopped. It could only be through God when you stop thinking like that, when the propaganda can't hit you anymore. It's like the creator, you realize we're all created by God to be in his image. So anyway, and I said, so when I was saying all this, I didn't even say all that. I said, the chosen people thing, I said, it's to the point where I can't even criticize BB. I was like, I can't say nothing about BB. I said, but it's really weird when, if I live in America and if I talk about Biden, if I say that I don't trust my government here, then I'm all of a sudden so based, like, oh, you're so based because you don't trust the government. But then if I tell you I don't trust the government over there too, in a foreign nation that I don't know anything about those people, and it's like, I was like, and then all of a sudden I'm a bad guy because I'm asking questions. I'm asking what happened or whatever. And so the guys, at least they were trying to say like, well, no, maybe it's not like. Then this chick came on and she was like, wait a minute. I'm a woman and I need to speak. First of all, I don't know what that means. So already I was like, this chick is crazy. I was like, she's nuts. So now she's like, I hear you asking what happened. What do you say? What happened? People were killed. And when she cut me off, I was saying, I know there was an attack that day. What I was saying was, I know there was a terrible attack that day. I don't question that. But who dropped the ball? How was this allowed to happen? And I was like, how is this allowed to happen? Like, that's what I was asking. Like, the surveillance said, come on, Charlie Kirk even said it. He's been there. He's like, there's just no way. He's like, you can't even get a feather through there without a problem. So how did this happen? So I'm like, so that's what I was trying to. She's like, you don't get to, you're asking what happened. People died, people were raped, and I'm tired of people coming. And she's going off of it. And she hit the mute button. So I'm just like, yo, this broad is really yelling at me. Right? Like, okay. So then I came back on. I was like, so when she unmuted, I said, but the point that I'm trying to make, I said, I never said that a terroristic attack didn't happen. I said, that's crazy. I said, of course, Hamas went in there and killed all those people. I said, that's horrible. That's disgusting. I was like, I'm not questioning that at all. I said, but I'm questioning, how was this allowed to happen? I want to know. I said, because y'all are telling me that I can't, Bibi is going to be so important to me. You're saying to stop me, stop Hamas from coming here. So I'm going to need Bibi. But so I want to know what happened, how did Bibi drop the ball? Because if I'm going to need him, I need to, did we fix the problem? I'm sorry. And she cut me off again. And she was like, people keep asking that they need to see, they need to hear, what Bibi did wrong. You don't need to know what Bibi did wrong. There's an investigation going on. I'm tired of people coming. And this girl's yelling because I asked the question. And I said, but if I criticize Bibi, it's a problem. This girl literally did exactly what I said. That happens, right? And so she's going off. And then I'm like, well, okay. So she's going off and she's like, everything that's been going on. Blah, blah, blah. And I can hear the hysteria, like Ben Shapiro in her voice. So I'm hitting the purple heart, like, you know what? Let me just send some hearts her way. Let me just send some hearts. Like, listen, sis, I don't have a problem with you. Like, I really don't. But then she says something like I didn't hear what she said because I was about to say something like, again, you're yelling at me because then she muted me. And she must have said, my cousin died. I went to hit the heart still just to hit the heart. I hit the laugh button instead because, I was moving around. She was like, you're laughing because my cousin died. You B. And I'm not cursing on my live, but she called me a B 4 times. Okay. And I'm sitting here like, wow. Oh, wow. Like, are you serious right now? Like, and held the mute button just so she can just bathe me under the word B, like over and over again. Okay, 4 times, right? And I'm just like, yeah, this broad is crazy. And so the other co-hosts, the men, they're like, no, I don't think she was laughing. Like, no, it's really a tough time right now. It's really a tough time. So when I came back on the thing, I said, you think it's necessary to call me a B? I was like, I said, my hand slipped, for crying out loud. I was like, that's what happened. And then actually she called me a B before that. And I think I had came back on and I was like, you're calling me a B for what? I was like, I did not curse at you. Like, why are you calling me a B? And then she cut me off and said the cousin thing, and she called me a B more times. And that's when I was like, my hand slipped. I would never laugh about somebody. And she took me all the way off the whole space where I couldn't even come. She blocked me, so I couldn't even come back on. And so that's the point, right? So the point is, you didn't even let me because you knew you were ridiculous. Number one, you knew I was making points. That's what happened, and people were listening. You didn't like that, so you had to come and tell me how anti-Semitism was the problem. So, and that, yes, and so now because you did too much, right? And so now you had to get rid of me on a space because I was gonna. And believe me, if it was 10 years ago, if it was 6 years ago, the things that I would have said would have not been right, but I'm older and I'm trying to be a better person. But all I was going to say was, you have seriously solidified my point. I said that one time. I was like, because you made my point. I would have told her, you made my point. This is what I mean. As soon as somebody asks a question about something Jewish, they got to get, this is the type of bathing that they need to get. It's not cool. It's not cool because I certainly don't want anybody acting like that. If somebody says something about Black people, when Black people are committing most of the crimes, not all Blacks, but a lot, we already know, right? I'm not going to start, you be, I don't care about that. Da, da, da. No, you have a right to notice the pattern. Now, somebody like Charlie Kirk, he always puts that on there, but he's still shilling for AIPAC or whatever he thinks he's doing. So he's a nut. But you have a right to notice a pattern. You have a right to ask whatever question you want. I'm not going to call you a B. So to me, I was like, this girl is, and the men, they were very nice. They were like, it's a sensitive time right now. I said, listen, I understand that. I said, but there's no excuse for that kind of behavior. I'm going to keep it real. I said, she needs some time off this app because she's hysterical and she needs some time to decompress. May the Lord keep her, like seriously. 6 years ago, I would have been like, I don't give a F what you got going on, but I'm not I'm not that person. I understand that people are, are very emotional. And it was a woman. Chicks be crazy. So it was a woman. I'm a woman. I need to speak. More red flags than a communist. All the time. Yes, okay. Like I was just like, what? Like I was like, where I mean, full on hysteria. And I'm like, and then you hitting the mute button and trying to drag me on your space. And I'm like, oh, thank God that I have God in my life. And thank God I'm a psych nurse. So I'm used to being cursed out. However, none of my patients have called me a bee since the last 2 months. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. But that's the story. That's what happened to me today. But it's okay. So, like I said, on this channel, we speak the inconvenient truth. That's what I always say. Inconvenient to anybody. If it's the truth or we can ask questions, there's nobody is ridiculous or disgraceful. None of that. Ask questions and we get to solutions. This is America. And the problem is, and what's happening now, under these, and let me just end with this, under all this guise of, because really what happened on her space, me questioning Israel's, defense and BB and all that, under the ADL and different hate speech laws, I committed an act of NT, right? That's not true. I'm asking questions, but they have paperwork, they have rules and regulations written for this already. And the country, nobody's pushing back. Except for Candace, who's slightly pushing back, but she's not really landing it as hard as I think that she could, right? They have laws saying that you can't ask questions of Israel, or you can't say it's anti to say a Jewish person is more concerned about Israel than America. But there are people who are like, this is insane. And there's strategies, Ron DeSantis, he has his hate speech law in Florida. So here we are. We're seeing this stuff come to fruition. I don't want any regulations on speech. You can't control my mouth. You cannot control my mouth. You can't. This is America. And so this is where it is an American perspective on what's going on here. Never mind also the fact that we are funding the situation that's happening here. Okay. And so we are fully implicated in it. And our national security, our national safety is at risk. Absolutely it is. Yes, it is. But I'm going to go ahead and go. So I think everybody had lives today. Thursday is like a weird day to do lives, but I think everybody does lives on Thursdays. So, but I want to thank you guys for coming through. I really had a good time with everybody. Again, Anglo for coming through, giving all the knowledge. And I'm just going to end it right here. Bye, guys.